The presidential race may still be in flux, but we got a big victory today. Key Senate race in Alaska has been called for Republican Dan Sullivan. Barring upsets in both Georgia runoffs, the GOP is now likely to hold the United States Senate. So what does it mean? It means the Trump movement is here to stay, and it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome, friends, to Hold the Line. Can you see it right now? Democrats are finally waking up to a reality. They're not going to admit it. They're not going to say it out loud. But these voter fraud allegations are not going away. Evidence has been provided, including numerous sworn affidavits. You don't have to believe them, but guess what? They do count as evidence. The Trump campaign is going to see this thing through. They're going to make sure this was a free and fair election. If the president, if the administration, if the campaign are satisfied that they've had their day in court, then yes, in fact, Trump supporters will move on to the battle ahead. But we won't be moving on to a new GOP. That's just lib delusion. And this, I think, is what's finally dawning on the other side. This was a very unusual election cycle. Of course, the shadow of the pandemic hung over the entire process and everyone's perceptions of what had happened this year. Lockdowns, huge job losses, lives lost as a result of COVID-19 in the hundreds of thousands. These issues were not a result, however, of President Trump and his policies, and most reasonable people understand that. Of course, Democrats tried very hard to convince us otherwise, and they may have been successful enough to win this election. They say every life lost is Trump's fault, and we know that's absurd. It's just a stupid thing to say, but they said it anyway. Under different circumstances, we'd likely have seen an overwhelming victory for President Trump. I think there's very little doubt about that. But even under the current COVID realities, we have the GOP now poised to maintain control in the Senate and to pick up House seats when all said and done. Somehow the American people were able to see through the media smear campaigns and the lies. America decided that the party of rioting lunatics probably not who we want in charge going forward. Now, maybe they were able to convince just enough folks that were exhausted by Trump personally, by his tweets. It's true, look, Trump can be a loose cannon. He is a counterpuncher. He's not always focused on the specific target he should be. But ultimately, Trump is somebody who fights back. We've known that all along. When he takes incoming from the media, he throws it right back at him. That's not going to stop. So what do they think happens now? That we're all going to be quiet? That we're going to bend the knee? That Trump supporters are all going to just melt away? No, we're not going to do that. I'd rather continue the fight, continue to make the argument, yes, respect the rules of our system, because that's essential to our side. We believe in rules and laws and the Constitution. We believe that we're having these political debates within an established framework that the Founding Fathers set up for us. And we continue in that tradition, so win or lose in this presidential election, Trumpism is here to stay. The movement he started is about much more than any one policy issue, and yes, it's about more than just the president himself. He has changed the mindset of people within the GOP. He's reoriented the party in a way many would have believed impossible just a few years ago. He's made a broad appeal to blue-collar Americans. He's made inroads with minority communities. Of course, there are those within the party who will fight tooth and nail to return to a pre-Trump era. Opportunists and rhinos whose voices are going to be amplified by the left-wing media because they're useful to Democrats at this time. But those voices don't represent the base. They don't represent the average GOP voter. The GOP was 97% in support of Trump during really all of his presidency. This could have been a historic year for Democrats in the election. By all accounts, it should have been. But with COVID-19 still making everything more challenging for Trump and the administration, politically and otherwise, made Americans more frightened, less optimistic, less hopeful about the future, the best they could do, assuming the current vote tallies hold, which we'll see, was squeak out a narrow victory in a handful of states. They were promising a victory in the Senate and expansion of their control in the House of Representatives, but they were wrong on both counts. What does that wrongness tell us? How did we get to this point? We're here because Trump transformed the GOP into a mechanism for fighting, for pushing back, for holding firm. Yes, for holding the line. That's what Trumpism essentially is. You believe in something, you'll push for that idea, you'll fight for that idea. You might not like the way Trump fought sometimes, but the results are clear. The mainstream media is never going to recover its so-called objectivity and credibility. The Democrat Party's perception of a GOP that's essentially controlled opposition loses gracefully. That's not coming back either. Trumpism has done more than expose the left. It's exposed the social elites. It goes even beyond just the left-right ideological separation. It goes into the apparatus of societal control. Ask yourself, who really supports the old way, the pre-Trump way of politics? Hollywood, academia, Wall Street, corporate law firms, the big corporate law firms, they want to return to that old way of politics. There's a reason for that. And it's about more than any one policy issue. It's not just immigration or national security or the tax rate even for them. It's about the way things are supposed to be done. There are certain people who are supposed to be in charge. There are people who are supposed to be making all the decisions and benefiting their friends and their cronies and using government to do so. Then Trump comes in and he smashes up that system quite a bit. He calls it out. He says, no, we know who you are. We know about the sellout of American interests by giant corporations, the K Street corridor in D.C., all those think tanks and lobbyists. More than anyone else, Trumpism has exposed the tech oligarchs who are exerting more and more control over what we're allowed to say and what we're allowed to see. Why would we ever go along with the increasingly onerous tentacles of digital control from places like Twitter and Facebook? Because it's all so convenient. Because it's all so easy? Now conservatives are seriously considering alternatives. We're seeing an explosion in social media apps like Parler, where conservatives can speak without fear of being censored. Hopefully this is just the beginning. I've been saying for months now that it's time conservatives and people who believe in free speech and the free exchange of ideas start building their own platforms and institutions. That doesn't mean we have to abandon the other ones. It means growth. Instead of trying to just squabble over the scraps we're given from the table of the Democrats, the left, the mainstream media, the corporate press. This, my friends, is Trumpism. This would not have been the mentality under what would have been a Romney administration had he been able to win. This would not be the mentality under a continued Bush administration, compassionate conservatism. We were going to try to meet the left in the middle, they told us, bring them over to our side. But we've learned over the past several years just who the opposition is. Trumpism has exposed that. They want you to get fired from your job. They want to deplatform you and run you off the internet, ruined and humiliated. They can't be bought off. They won't be placated. They must be defeated. The Trump movement is essential to that. And that is why the movement lives on, friends. And even in this very challenging time, there are still victories to speak of. The Senate victory in Alaska today puts us one step closer to GOP control, which means that Joe Biden's agenda for the next 2 years is going nowhere. Don't listen to the exaggerated claims of Trumpism's demise, friends. It's not true. And the left is just starting to wake up to that. All right, when we come back, we'll have more on the future of the Trump movement with talk show host Mark Simone. Stay with us. What coffee are you drinking? You gotta be drinking Black Rifle coffee. This is absolutely the best coffee you'll get anywhere. Black Rifle Coffee Company CEO and founder Evan Hafer started Black Rifle after over 20 years in the U.S. Army as an infantryman and special forces soldier. Evan founded Black Rifle Coffee in 2014 along with Army Ranger Matt Best. They combined two passions, developing premium fresh roasted coffee and honoring and supporting those who serve on the front lines. Black Rifle Coffee has donated over 45,000 pounds of coffee or over 1 million cups of coffee overseas to soldiers as well as to law enforcement officers, wildland firefighters on the West Coast, and medical workers during the COVID-19 response just in 2020 alone. For every coffee purchase you make throughout November, Black Rifle Coffee will send a bag of their limited edition holiday roast to a service member currently deployed overseas to be delivered by Christmas morning. Being founded and operated by veterans, the team at Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops spending the holidays away from home. Want to support the cause? Go to blackriflecoffee.com/buck today and check out the freshest coffee in America. The team has spent thousands of hours tasting, sourcing, and perfecting coffee from all over the world. blackriflecoffee.com/buck gets you 20% off coffee, apparel, and gear, as well as 20% off your first month of the Coffee Club. Over the past 4 years, we've seen a nationwide political movement like no other. From his 2016 victory speech on the forgotten men and women of our country to his massive Make America Great Again rallies, President Trump has united a base of Republican supporters that we could have only dreamed of in the past. We're more than a week from when we saw the first election results coming in, and major networks have since called the race for Joe Biden. But despite media efforts pretending it's all over, Trumpism is still going strong. According to a new Morning Consult poll, 70% of Republicans don't believe the 2020 election was free and fair, and of that group, 78% believe mass mail-in voting led to widespread fraud. So if Joe Biden does in fact take the White House January 20th, what's going to happen to the Trump base? What is next for the MAGA movement that Donald Trump started? Joining me now to discuss this is Mark Simone, radio talk show host here in NYC on 710 WOR. Mark, great to see you.
Great to see you. How you doing?
I'm good. So I think that the anti-Trump libs in the media, the left in general, are waking up to a new reality right now. And that is, even if, let's say, the counts don't go in Trump's favor when all of these legal challenges are finished, he's still going to be Trump. And there's still going to be over 70 million people who not only voted for him, but want to see a return of Trumpism. What do you think happens if Donald doesn't actually get 4 more years? What does he do?
Well, you said to wake left wing wake up to reality. We could argue that for a while.
Yeah.
So here in New York City, they covered every window with plywood, every store, every restaurant. I call it the plywood poll. The fact that they boarded up everything. They were worried that Trump would win and there would be right. Well, I noticed not one store, not one window have they taken that plywood down. So there's still hope for Donald Trump. I think he'll somehow pull it off. He's a guy I've known for years. He always pulls something out of his sleeve. Things just somehow break his way. If he doesn't, he's already set up a 2024 committee. People are contributing to it already. 2024 is an obvious victory for him after 4 very dead, slow years of Joe Biden. I think also, there's rumors all over the place that he would go on the radio. He'd become one of us. That I don't think Rush is going anywhere. Rush will be fine, but if anything did, he would take over that show. Television, obviously, he's brilliant on TV. Hey, the first time he ever tried a TV show, it was #1 in the ratings and ran 14 years. So he's got a lot of possibilities, a lot of books. He could continue to do these rallies and be successful. So he's not going anywhere. And he's actually more dangerous to Biden and the Democrats as a critic when he's out of office. He's freer to say whatever he wants. So he's a problem for Democrats.
Now, we've seen a little bit of the GOP, the old school GOP, start to peak out again, Mark, and suggest that we're going to have a return to the way things were before. The more Romney, McCain, Paul Ryan, shall we say, GOP approach. What's your take on that?
Well, you got to remember the Republicans would like to get rid of him too. He totally disrupted their business model. Republicans and Democrats, you think you're going to just drain the swamp. It was 50 years building that swamp. That swamp has infrastructure to it. You're not going to take it out in 3 or 4 years. And that business model has been perfect for them. Donors write massive checks to lobbyists. Lobbyists write massive checks to the congressmen, to their super PACs, their PACs, their campaigns. They love that model. When Donald Trump came into office, that first meeting with all the tech guys where he let the cameras watch that and he said, "Here's my cell number. Call me if you need anything." That's not the way they want to do things. They want checkbooks and donors and lobbyists. They're not into this. Call me directly and we'll be happy to help you. So I hate to say it, they'll be glad to see him go too. Back to business as usual.
Now, we also have the other side of this, which, since we're looking into the future a little bit, under the assumption that Joe Biden wins, which is still, despite what the Biden campaign says, an assumption. This is part of the process, as everyone watching at home knows. The legal challenges, the making sure that the vote count is accurate, the recounts. But let's assume, Mark, we've got a Biden administration. Here's the kind of stuff that we're already seeing. When I'm speaking to foreign leaders, this is what Biden or one of his handlers tweeted out. I'm telling them America's going to be back. We're going to be back in the game. Now, we both know that China will be really happy if Joe Biden becomes president for pretty obvious reasons. But what does he think back in the game means? Toppling Gaddafi and letting Libya turn into a terrorist-run hellhole, the collapse of Syria and Iraq next door because of ISIS, major military escalation with nothing to show for it in Afghanistan. I mean, can you try to translate what Biden's thinking is on this for everybody at home?
It's just they create these myths like Charlottesville, these things that never happened. I was watching NBC News, the nightly news. They said a chance for America to re-engage, to end the isolation. Donald Trump is on the phone with these world leaders all the time. That's the way he is. He just picks up the phone and calls to say, hello, we're totally engaged. As far as re-engaging, yeah, with Iran, that's the only place we're going to be re-engaging. That Iran deal is back. There'll be another pallet of cash on the runway. And Israel is terrified of this stuff. There are a lot of world leaders. They might not love Donald Trump, but that's the way it's supposed to be. They're going to love Joe Biden because a senile old man is perfect to deal with. Here, just sign this. He'll sign anything.
Are you looking forward to being at least in a position, assuming, and I have to keep saying that because otherwise people get mad at me, but let's assume that the count still stays for Biden. I think Democrats are going to have a heck of a time trying to explain why this was a good decision if and when he actually becomes president. He tweeted out, America, I'm honored you've chosen me to lead our great country. The work ahead of us will be hard, but I promise you this, I'll be a president for all Americans, whether you voted for me or not. I will keep the faith you've placed in me. This is interesting. Maybe he should tell the various prominent Democrats who say that there should be lists made. I don't know if you saw on CNN, they're keeping a running tally of senators that have not yet called to congratulate Biden, obviously all Republicans. Maybe you should let them know that there's this new unity message. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look what you got on the screen. These are just slogans. I mean, he should open a bumper sticker company. These are just like Hallmark slogans. And yeah, I mean, they're busy making their list. They're talking about like it's a blacklist. Only this time, the communists are blacklisting everybody. So the whole thing is ridiculous. His call for unity. As Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, they chased me and my family out of a restaurant, spit on my car. First press secretary ever had to have Secret Service protection. This call for unity is laughable. I think you also may see Democrats have the biggest case of buyer's remorse in history. This sleepy, slow, old guy, the way he talks, the State of the Union could take 12 hours to get through. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be great.
You think he makes it through a full 4-year term without Kamala Harris stepping in to take the job?
You know, everybody keeps talking about Kamala Harris. The woman that's going to be running things is Dr. Jill Biden. That's the new Hillary. She's going to be controlling everything. All of this is being run by the committee that runs Biden. I think Obama leads that. And I'm sure they're already thinking about what they're going to have to do to keep Dr. Jill Biden in her place. That's the problem. She's the one you can.
Do we have to call her doctor? Come on, Mark. She's got a PhD in education? I'm sorry. She's not diagnosing cancer. I don't know if we get to call her a doctor.
Well, she's like a teacher. She's a high school teacher.
Right. No. Oh, she insists that we call her doctor. I'm just saying I resist. I #resist this, Mark.
Very late in life, she went back to school and got a PhD in education. You know who did that in the 70s when his career was a little washed up? Bill Cosby. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a time where in the 80s, you had to call him Dr. William H. Cosby for a while. So she follows in the Cosby tradition.
I didn't realize that. I thought he just was a Cosby or a doctor rather because of the Cosby Show. So learning something new here with Mark Simone. Everybody listen to Mark on 710 WOR in NYC and check him out online. Follow him on social media. Mark Simone, great to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Coming up, we all know the polls were wrong about the presidential race, but did they get anything right? We'll take a look at the other failures tonight in the Buck Brief. My friends, our constitutional republic has rarely faced the perils we do today. Mob rule, a push for socialism, violence, suppression of freedoms. Edmund Burke said it, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. If you want to help preserve America right now, while we still can, join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, the fastest growing conservative group in America. Joining AMAC gives you access to money-saving benefits, cutting-edge news, and a great bi-monthly magazine. But more importantly, AMAC fights for you. A socialist storm is brewing. If you care about our future like I do, then join AMAC today. Over 2 million constitutional conservatives like you and me have already joined AMAC. Stand with us by joining right now. Just go to amac.us/buck. That's amac.us/buck. The benefits of AMAC membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join today, amac.us/buck. In most professions, if you fail at your job, if you're really bad at it, you probably get fired, unless you work for the government. But one group in the private sector that seems to be exempt from that, pollsters. I didn't think they could mess up things any worse than they did in 2016. Oh, but they managed to do just that. This time around, they didn't just botch the presidential race, but Republicans outperformed in down ballot races as well. From narrowing the Democratic lead in the House to a razor-tight majority holding the Senate and flipping even more state legislative chambers, the polls just seem to have screwed up at every level in this year's election. Of course, a few polling firms got things right, but the vast majority of the gold standard pollsters fell way short of the mark. So was this just gross incompetence, or was it purposeful suppression polling? Let's explore the collapse of this once vaunted industry on today's Buck Brief. I got to get a job as a pollster. Apparently people pay you money and you don't have to be right and you don't have to tell them anything that they wouldn't already know if they had a basic idea of party affiliation in a lot of states. And you get to go on all these shows and just talk about your numbers. Ooh, look at my numbers. Well, the numbers were a big problem, as we know, in this election. I think it's worth the after-action review that we're doing right now so that we all remember going into not just the midterm elections, how about the Georgia Senate runoffs that are happening here? I'm gonna trust those polls? I have a feeling some of the pollsters will find a way to be a little more accurate because we will remember in January what they just did in November. And they don't want it to look too bad. It can't be too obvious. But nonetheless, something's up here, folks. For the entire profession, really, they've got an issue. And the issue, just like computer glitches in Michigan, always seems to favor Joe Biden. Isn't that cute? Isn't that interesting? So here is a recap of how wrong the polls were. I think this is based on the average of the Real Clear Politics. Iowa, you can put this up on the screen, Iowa got it wrong by 6.2%. Ohio got it wrong by 7.1%. Wisconsin, 6.1%. Florida, 4.3%. Texas, they got Texas wrong by 4.6%. I could sit and guess at what the presidential results will be in some of these states in 4 years and honestly have a very high likelihood of doing better on all counts in all of these states than what we saw professional pollsters pull off. Remember, they're getting paid for this. And then there's also the effect that it may have on voting patterns. And this is where we get into the motivations. Why is it that the polls always tighten for the Republican right before the election? Because they want to be able to say, well, you know, we saw this trend happening. Maybe we were off a little bit, but we weren't off by that much. And if you want to get cited by CNN, if you want your poll to end up on national TV, because if you're a lazy political producer, let me tell you, the easiest thing you can do in the news media is say, hey, you see that poll? Let's have the pollster on. Do you think you're going to tell them what they don't want to hear in these polls? Especially when we're talking about an election as heated and contested as this one. But it's not just liberal media out there and the MSM that's got this problem. The decision desk, as much as I love Fox, the decision desk over there had a little problem. Play it.
The Fox News decision desk can now project that Democrats will retain control of the House of Representatives and expand their majority by at least 5 seats.
Nope, they're actually losing seats. So it's not just that they didn't expand by 5. If they expanded by 2 or 3, you'd say, okay, close enough, right? They're making a projection, and that's always going to involve some degree of analysis and changing and rechanging figures and all that. But they got it in the wrong direction. They misidentified the overall trend, which was that Republicans actually gained seats, did not gain back the majority, but gained seats vis-a-vis the Democrats in this critical election, which I think is important. I think it's important for everybody to understand that. And then you have a House seats tweet. Of the 16 House seats yet to be called by the New York Times, Republicans have a shot to pick up 8 of them. Democrats have only 1 potential pickup left on the board. The GOP's already flipped a net of 6 seats. So that gives you a sense of how far, instead of losing 5, they're up 6 seats so far. That's wrong by a mile. That's so wrong that it's likely that a person who's reasonably politically astute would have been able to guess much more accurately than the pollsters could predict with all their science-y sounding methods. And then there's state legislatures. Here you go. This is the GOP doing a little bit of a victory dance here. We did not lose control of a single state legislature. We flipped a legislature in New Hampshire. We grew the supermajority in the Kansas House. We retained control of legislatures in key states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Michigan, Texas. In other words, Republicans swept down ballot. So, that's fascinating, isn't it? It's also interesting because why did the Republicans do so well in all these states, including critical battleground states, down ballot? But we're to believe that somehow Joe Biden had this miraculous showing. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I got questions. I got questions about it, and that much is for sure. So I think it's important that going forward, whenever we have pollsters that are telling us how it's going to go in the election, we should say, how did you go in the last election, Mr. Pollster? Were you close? Even a little bit? If the answer is no, we're going to take, I'm not saying ignore them, I'm not saying they can never be right again, but let's take them with a grain of salt. And let's also understand that there are a lot of motivations that people can have professionally to be wrong if they think it will be good for them to be wrong. Just look at 95% of the news media, for example. So I think this is important, friends. We'll take a look at more here on Hold the Line in just a moment. From spending 4 years delegitimizing the Trump presidency to calling the 2020 election for Joe Biden before it's official, mainstream media is now obsessed with the peaceful transition of power. Here are some recent headlines that fall right into the lib hysteria category. CNN writes how Trump's transition of power delay threatens national security and public safety. That's right. We're all going to die because Trump has filed lawsuits about an election. An AP headline reads, quote, refusing to concede, Trump blocks cooperation on transition. And then you have these two beauties from the Washington Post. Quote, the transition process is too important to be left to Trump's whims and the life-threatening costs of a delayed transition. Oh, wow, they really are saying we're going to die because of the delays of the transition. Oh, these people are so nuts. But let's be honest. None of the so-called journos actually believe Trump's not going to leave office in January. Come on. So do you think it's time they spare us the theatrics? Can we have a couple weeks off? Here to weigh in is Michael Malice, host of the podcast You're Welcome, and author of Dear Reader and The New Right. Mr. Malice, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Buck. It's been a while.
One of my favorite Maliceisms is your view of and some of your lines about the corporate press. You had a tweet here with a fellow named Wajahat Ali. He wrote, you can't heal or reform the GOP, who are now an extremist party. They have to be broken, burned down, and rebuilt. You responded, the corporate press is the enemy of the people, sometimes explicitly. I think you are correct, and I just want to know how you view this now as a thesis at a time when it seems more and more Americans are being red-pilled, waking up to the reality of the corporate press.
Well, I'm glad you just corrected yourself and said corporate press, because earlier you said mainstream media. And that's a term that really has to be taken out of popular use on the right. There is nothing mainstream about them. This is a radical ideology that has had its roots in American culture for over a century. And the claim that they in any way represent the center of this country or even the center of the left, I think is fallacious, number one. Number two is what you see, Wajahat and many others are explicitly calling for the open destruction of their opposition. And they're doing this, of course, in the name of unity. And it's technically true in a totalitarian state where there is no opposition. You do have unity, you do have uniformity. But what I think you got a little bit wrong is they're not yelling at Trump. They're yelling at Trump's supporters because they had a fantasy in their minds that President Trump, who is some supernatural evil, once you kill the head vampire, the movie ends. All the minions go away, they go home, the heroes rejoice. The fact that many of Trump's fans weren't really fans of Trump per se, but what Trump was doing, the fact that they understand that far more than Joe Biden, their enemy is CNN, the Washington Post, and outlets like that, and that they're not giving up now that Trump has lost, is confusing to them, and they're getting rocked back on their heels because they thought this was going to be the victory of themselves, the good guys, over the bad guys. And what they're telling Trump, give up, they're telling you and your listeners, submit, stop fighting, you lost, go home, it's over. And it's not over. And no one is going home. And these people are going to have a very, very rude awakening immediately.
It's remarkable. It does seem that there was a widespread belief that had been fostered by the corporate press, as we can agree to call them, that if only Trump was gone, then everything that Trump talked about, the change in the approach of the GOP, the change in the national political conversation, substantial change on issues like trade, like immigration, like the way the president should interact when he's from the Republican Party with the opposition media, as if that was really going to go away. You think they actually deluded themselves into believing that?
Yes. There's also another lie that they promulgate, which is that Trump was an unprecedented divisive president. And now that he's gone, we can go back to the way things were, where we're unified as a country. Whereas you and I and people who work in our space can remember perfectly well 2011, 2012, 2013, unprecedented obstructionism. Unprecedented obstructionism. No one has ever faced such opposition as Barack Obama. So this claim that this only happened when President Trump came into office and that a nation was divided is, on their own terms, a lie. So they're going to also be very confused because people who are conservatives, if they had their way in 2012 and Mitt Romney won, they would have that week of celebration that, Barack Obama, who they hated, was defeated. And then they'd have to go home and realize, wait a minute, now I have 4 years of Mitt Romney as president. So many of these AOC types who thought Trump was the devil, literally Hitler, Mussolini, and all these people put together, are now going to have to watch as Cindy McCain and John Kasich help Joe Biden try to construct the most bipartisan presidentship since George H.W. Bush, if not earlier.
Now, assuming that fails, and I would bet considerably on the side of it not being a successful effort, and I'm not even sure how long it'll last, or even if it's made, forget about it, in good faith, with seriousness, or if they're just going through the motions. I mean, they've talked about unity. They really mean bend the knee, as you pointed out, and do what we say. How long do you think it is before they might move to Trump was a uniquely evil monster, and actually whoever becomes the voice, I think it will continue to be Trump most likely if Biden takes office, but whoever the main voices of opposition are, they're within the Republican Party, they're monsters too. I mean, I still remember when Mitt Romney was a guy with women stuck in binders who gave old people cancer while abusing the dog on the roof of his car.
Oh, yeah. George W. Bush was an unprecedented monster. Before that, it was Newt Gingrich. There's always a boogeyman. The right has their own boogeymen, too, Nancy Pelosi and Clinton and others like that. But I think they're going to be a rude awakening, because I genuinely think Joe Biden, who's been a creature of Washington since the Nixon era, really has a better opinion of Mitch McConnell than most of your listeners. And I think he's going to try to reach out and work with Republicans. And this is going to drive a lot of Democrats very, very crazy.
Interesting. Yeah, if he did make any real effort at bipartisan movement, that would drive the AOC wing, the socialists within the Democrat midst, completely insane. I mean, that they would view as really betraying their cause, which is the total eradication of conservatism in the Republican Party in America. I think they've made that much clear. Michael, you're also a guy that operates in some of the new media spaces and various platforms. I've been on your show, you've been on my shows. Do you think that because of what we saw, which was not surprising, but it was unprecedented, the suppression of stories damaging to one political candidate at the height of an election cycle by social media companies, not even now we're talking about by the corporate news media.
Sure.
Do you think that's created a rift and a shift that is going to play out with profound implications, or are we just going to go back to the old normal?
Oh, I think this is wonderful, because this is something that's going to cause them great problems. So let me give you a non-political example. Right now, if I'm on Facebook and I want to sell a cologne that's tobacco scented, the marketplace algorithm will flag it and pull the ad from me. So if you are going to have a search engine, but you're going to gummy up the works so that I can't actually use it to search, that is going to drive consumers away from my product, because I can't find what I'm looking for. These filters cannot be used effectively when you're dealing with infinite free flow information. And it is very hard to maintain a universal user base, as Facebook and Google would like to do, when a significant portion of your customers regard you as having your finger on the scale and being a partisan actor. It's going to make them feel this is not a place for me. Comedy Central is a good example of this. Ever since Jon Stewart left, and Trevor Noah, who's certainly the B-list of that group, it has made it even more of a kind of this corporate jihadi outlet. Their numbers are in the toilet, and anyone who's even moderate is not really going to be a fan of that show, and it's going to have deleterious consequences. So I think it's very healthy as our nation continues to self-segregate along ideological lines.
What happens in your mind to CNN and MSNBC and these legacy media platforms that still have some considerable reach? CNN.com, people often forget, it's kind of a default for those who are looking for news. It comes up very high in Google search results. So they still reach a whole lot of folks. What do you think happens to those networks in a post-Trump era? Do they approach propping up old man Biden with the same gusto that they did tearing down Trump?
Well, I don't think I'm in a position legally to tell you what's going on in my mind to people at CNN. But in terms of your more specific question, we are going to be seeing the Republican Party fighting harder to maintain Biden in power than they did to maintain Trump in power once the 25th Amendment talk starts happening and they try to pull him out in terms of Kamala Harris.
You really believe that? I mean, I've said the same thing, but I just want to get you on the record here. You think that if Biden ascends to the office, as is expected, but not a done deal right now, that it's only a matter of time before Kamala is going to step up and step in?
I think that's an inevitability, yes.
Yeah, I mean, based on his age, I think the statistics, the numbers, so this isn't some crazy conspiracy theory. The guy's almost 80, so he's going to be getting into his mid-80s. The chance of him having a major health event, we both know, and I don't mean anything, and I don't wish any ill will on the man, but just based on his age, it's a very real possibility. There's a reason why you can't take out a $10 million life insurance policy when you're 90, right? I mean, no one's going to insure you for that for obvious reasons. Joe Biden is really pushing it with his health and with this, so Kamala Harris would step in. And then just clarify this for me before we let you go, but do you think the GOP would want to help keep Biden in place and prevent his removal? Is that where you were going?
Gun to head, who would you vote for, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris?
Yeah,
I don't think it'd be a hard choice. That's exactly my point, right?
Yeah, well, fair enough.
So they would do everything in their power to make sure she's not president and he stays in. That would be a no-brainer.
We'll have to have you back. Well, this will be quite a prediction in time, by the way. Remember when I was on your show, I said that the House will refuse to certify the election results if Trump wins? Well, it looks like we're just refusing to certify election results in a different way right now. But I knew it was going to get ugly here. But Michael Malice, everybody, check out You're Welcome. Follow him on social media. The man himself. Michael, good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
It's almost time for the latest edition of The Buckshot. Stay with us. Fellow Patriots, MAGA CBD is a revolutionary American-made product that is safe for work, THC-free, and features patented NASA technology, making it the highest quality CBD oil on the market. Dedicated to providing the purest, most effective products they can, MAGA CBD provides third-party testing results from industry-leading experts. MAGA CBD is 100% committed to customer satisfaction and product quality. Best of all, 10% of proceeds benefit veterans and first responders. Look, personally, MAGA CBD has helped me sleep through the night, something I used to struggle with. You can really feel and taste the difference with their apple pie flavored oil. What CBD product in the market could be more American? MAGA, NASA, apple pie. It's America at its finest. For your CBD needs, look no further than MAGA CBD. Learn more and order today at www.magacbd.org and save 10% with promo code BUCK. That's magacbd.org, promo code BUCK. Congresswoman ILHAN OMAR suddenly likes Fox News. Joe Biden makes a statement about America we're going to have to talk about. An anti-police politician calls the police. It's all part of our daily roundup of left-wing lunacy we call The Buckshot. I don't think I can train my French bulldog to chase ducks like that. It would be fun, though, to watch her try. She would expect someone else to do it on her behalf, but it's a cute little dog. All right, let's start with ILHAN OMAR here. This was in response to a clip that went a little bit viral earlier in the week of Sandra Smith over at Fox News, who was on an open mic and expressed some editorial dismay when one of the guests that was on her program, but was talking to another host of the program, was discussing the need for these legal challenges to go forward and the possible fraud of the Biden campaign. This did not go unnoticed by enemies of the Trump re-election effort, including ILHAN OMAR. Play it.
Whoever is decided to be the president, remember, just because CNN says, or even Fox News says that somebody's president doesn't make them president. So I think everybody wants to know that this was done properly and legally.
What is happening? Trace, we've called it.
And I think we have to look into every one of these concerns.
Yeah, and I think Clea makes a very good point there, Steve. You know, look.
Now, ILHAN OMAR there said, we are all Sandra. So she had a moment of unity with Fox host Sandra Smith. I'll just say this. There does seem to be a perception, and look, everybody, if you had open mic by accident near any TV host, they'd say a much sketchier stuff than that, I can assure you. But we've all reached this point where I think we understand that the news media thinks that somewhere in the Constitution it's declared that the news media shall declare who the next president is. It's not how it works. That's not a thing. And I know that there's all this talk now about credibility and calls made, everything else. What matters at this stage is that we get it right. And in getting it right, even if it's not the outcome that many of you watching this, and I certainly want, which is that the vote count of legally counted and legally cast and counted ballots goes for Donald Trump, even if that's not the case, by trying to get these answers, we will have dug deeper into the process to make sure that we have a more free and fair vote down the line, that we know we can trust the system. So it's absolutely essential. There is no good faith counter-argument to counting the votes properly and bringing legal challenges where they are believed to be legitimate. This is all within the system. It's all completely acceptable. So the news media might want to take a beat here a little bit. Just take a little step back. They've all made their calls. Everybody put tons of pollsters on TV who were shockingly wrong for months and months and months. So we've all got a little bit in the media of egg on our faces. Look, I thought Trump was going to win outright, except I did say that Pennsylvania was going to take a while to count and the Democrats would fight it. So that part of it was correct. But all these predictions and things, that's something we could put aside. Let's let the process play out as the law and the Constitution determine. That's where we should all be. Of all the crazy stuff Joe Biden's been saying, and this came up earlier in the show with my friend Mark Simone here. This is what he says. I'm speaking to foreign leaders. I'm telling them America's going to be back. We're going to be back in the game. Joe Biden has got a problem here. The Obama-Biden foreign policy is an unbelievable legacy of failure. Catastrophic failure to lead. Remember, we supposedly took the point. We were at the forefront with United Nations assistance to end the conflict in Syria. Ended up killing about 500,000 people, they estimate. Chemical weapons used, genocide occurring, awful stuff going on. All under the Obama administration's watch. Right? The Assad regime, back and forth with the Islamic State, taking different territory, and then ISIS spills over into Iraq, routs the Iraqi army. We have to deploy more military forces there. I could sit here and go through every hot spot around the globe, buying off Iran, putting them in this deal that only allows them to become richer, more influential, more powerful, test their missiles that are conventional and advance them, all while being further entangled in the international financial system. For what? For some deal that doesn't even make them fully give up their nuclear ambitions and process? It's nothing but failure. The Obama administration on foreign policy for 8 years was nothing but failure. A lot of drone strikes, I would note as well, including against U.S. citizens without trial, but the media doesn't like to talk about that very much. So Joe Biden saying America's back. I mean, maybe this is going to be a great thing for Hunter Biden's bank account when the Chinese get to be all chummy, get to be buddy with the new President Biden. But I don't think it's going to be good for America. That much is for sure. So you've got a far-left Portland City Councilwoman from Portland, Joanne PDX. She called the cops on her Lyft driver after a night of gambling. Joanne has blamed white nationalists for the Portland riots and last week tried to pass a proposal to defund the Portland police. So she wants to defund them when she's not calling them. Hit it.
Allow him to leave me on the side of the road. I paid for a ride, and he canceled it. He says he canceled it. Yeah. So I'm just going to sit here until he sends me another ride. I can't send you a ride. You have to.
Only you can order another ride.
This is not a police issue, but I won't hang that. But I'm not getting out of this car in the dark.
Do you understand that only you can order another ride?
Well, I didn't cancel the ride. He canceled the ride.
Which is his obligation as a human being on the face of the earth to cancel a contract like that. It's not a crime. That's part of your user license agreement when you accept taking rides with strangers.
She's calling the cops over a canceled Uber ride, which happens to me like 3 times a week. And I can assure you I've never called the cops. What is this? I mean, most of us think of the cops as who you call when someone burglarizes your house or there's been a shooting or you got a problem like that. Not my Uber driver had the temerity to cancel on me. And I am a city councilwoman for Portland, which is a place that, as we know, is overrun by Antifa lunatics who are constantly rioting in the downtown and doing all kinds of madness. But the Democrats don't repudiate that. In fact, Joe Biden will tell you that Antifa is not even a group. It's just a lot of people who coordinate under a political ideological banner and pass out weapons and gear and use online comms and but they're not a group, it's just an idea. It's an idea that could hit you in the face with a lead pipe, unfortunately, as too many people have found out. I feel like we don't really use lead pipes. That's like the old school 80s rioting stuff. Now no one uses that. They use those collapsible batons from what I've seen. And speaking of the far left, de Blasio is the mayor of New York City. He's among the worst politicians in America. I would argue, among the worst politicians in the world. And I'm including North Korea. I mean, he's really bad. But de Blasio's daughter has been in the news a bit, including leaked footage of an arrest involving her. De Blasio is considered very anti-police, so somehow stuff like that from police archives gets out there. But this is the mayor's daughter in New York talking about, well, a whole bunch of things. Play it.
Why do you think this is so special? Why do you guys have it so special? Well, for me, it's really special because now we have the first Black Asian female president in office, elected, and Joe Biden was able to steal no, we were able to win. Sorry. I thought I was starting here. No, we were able to win the election. Yes. What does it mean to you?
Yeah. A lot of things. A lot of things going on. A lot of things said there. That's going to be it for the Buckshot today, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Talk to you tomorrow, same time. Shields high.